Hi everybody and welcome to another video. My name is Richard Seidlitz and I'm the owner of redpants.lol. It is a sweltering 35 degrees outside here in Yokohama, which I think is about 190 degrees, give or take, in Fahrenheit. But it's also incredibly humid, which is the worst part about this. But I can't complain too much because I'm about to hop on a flight to go back to America and finally get my car shipped to Japan. That's right, my 2007 supercharged Aston Martin V8 Vantage is getting picked up next week in just a few days, because it's already Friday here. In just a few days, it's getting picked up by a shipping company to be brought to Japan. Now, I've got a few things I need to do to the car to get it ready to not only ship, but also import and get registered in Japan, because that's a whole process. I know for probably all Americans, at least those of us car folks, when it comes to talking about cars going in and out of Japan, it is almost always about cars coming from Japan into the United States. And that's especially true given the 25-year rule is now lapsing for a lot of really interesting cars that we never got in America. Well, I'm doing it the other way because I'm an idiot and I can't do anything the simple, easy way. But given the way my car is built, it would actually be more cost effective for me to do this than to rebuild it with another car that's already in Japan. So if all goes well, I'll actually come out kind of ahead. Of course, the smart thing to do would be to sell the car and invest in Bitcoin. That's smart, right? Since it is so out of the ordinary, I figured it'd be a good idea to make a video about this to explain what I'm doing and why as far as this whole process is concerned. I'll also try to share some of the numbers, but I don't know how it's going to pertain to anybody else because they're always going to be different. For example, I'm paying close to $7,000 to ship my car from Idaho, and that includes trucking it to LA and then boating it from LA to Yokohama. I'm paying almost $7,000 for that, but about a third of that is just for insurance. So there's gonna be a lot of variables that aren't gonna really apply. The big variable, of course, is once it gets to Japan, the registration and testing process, but I'll burn that bridge once I cross it, or cross that bridge once I've burned it. Pray for me. Good morning. It is 6 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday, and I'm sitting in front of British, Italian, German motors, and we're about to do all that work on my car. The original plan that I had was that we could spend Saturday and Sunday doing the work at our own pace, getting some videos made, all that sort of fun stuff, and then on Monday we'd have some overflow in case anything went wrong, which I didn't think either of us expected anything to go wrong, but just in case, we'd have Monday as well. I could enjoy my car for a few days. The car that I've only seen a couple of times in the last year and a half, I'd get to drive it around a bit, enjoy myself. That would have been nice. And then the car would be picked up on Tuesday, and I would fly back to Japan on Wednesday. Halfway over the Pacific, I found out that my car was not being picked up on Tuesday, but instead, it was being picked up on Saturday, the day after I flew in, less than 24 hours after I flew in. So, instead of having 3 days to work on my car and make videos, we now have 5 hours. Getting my car ready for shipping meant a few things needed to happen. First, I got rid of the carbon fiber off the front, obviously the front lip being the main one. I also have a couple sets of canards that are going to go on this as well once I redo the paint, but as I'm sure a lot of you are aware, the paint on this is not in good condition. Those aren't water spots, well, not all of them. Some of that's missing paint. The primary things we need to do are going to be to raise up the suspension. Now, this is sitting at a 4.5-inch ride height right now. Factory is 5.3 inches. So we're going to raise it up to the maximum amount the suspension allows. Still not all the way to ride height. It's still going to be about 1/2 inch lower than the maximum, or excuse me, than the factory ride height. But it'll get us closer and it'll make it a bit easier to ship the car. The other thing we're going to do is change out these seats. Don't mind all the stuff in here. It's a busy morning. These seats are the Cobra Nagaros, and I really do love them. However, it's going to make it a lot harder to import into Japan because they have a lot of restrictions, and it'll make it easier to revert those back to stock since I have the stock seats. They're actually sitting inside. It's also going to get rid of one of the warning lights that I have. There is a warning light for the federal occupancy sensor for the passenger seat. It's a thing that American cars have. I don't think other countries have the same issue. But if you change out the passenger seat and you don't keep that sensor array, which means basically hacking apart the factory seat and adding it to the new seat, you're going to get an occupancy warning. It's going to look like an airbag warning, but it's going to be the occupancy seat, the seat occupancy warning that goes along with that. So I do have resistors in there to prevent airbag warnings, but I still get a warning light that cannot be turned off for that passenger seat because of the occupancy thing. The last thing that we're going to do is fix a couple little things. So I noticed that while my car was sitting in storage, this started getting knocked in. I don't know if somebody bumped into it or what, but that needs to be fixed. And we're just going to check the car over to make sure everything is okay before we get this thing onto the truck and then shipped off to go onto a boat to be shipped off to Japan. I'm not sure how obvious it'll be, but these seats have been sitting in a storage unit for a while. I actually was keeping them when I first put in the Cobra seats. I had no intention of moving to Japan, but I was keeping them because I wanted to turn them into office chairs. I did that with the driver's seat of my 2005 Subaru STI, and I was going to do something similar, more like lounge chair style for these, but that's why I kept them. Turns out, though, I'm going to end up using them again after all. A few fun facts about the seats that a lot of people don't realize. This is the release button for the seats if you want to fold them forward and get to the area behind them. That's electronic. If you don't have any battery power or for whatever reason this isn't working, or if you press it and nothing happens, this is the manual release for it. So you can go right here and pull up on this to release that same latch. Now, a lot of times people don't ever have to fold the seats forward, so over time, if you don't use it for long enough, the seat will get stuck, and when you press this button, nothing will happen. Well, if you give this a pull and you give the seat back, maybe a little push on it, that'll knock that latch loose and it'll be back to normal. Another thing is that there is a pouch right here that you can stick some papers into, and also another one in the front down here. And while I was filming it, the first seat is already out. The factory seats have the lower receiver attached to the base, so with these seats, these brackets are actually made for this seat, for this car, so that the seatbelt receiver can be attached to this base as well. Here's the same mounting point on this side for the passenger seat. It's difficult to tell, but the shells of these were actually painted in OEM mercury silver paint to match my car. Here's that lower receiver removed. Keep in mind, I don't know how many people even think about this, but it does have this connector on this because that's what lets the car know if the seatbelt is actually plugged in or not, if you've got your belts connected or not. Never forget that when you're putting in the seats, you need to do this part first, otherwise you're not going to be able to do it once the seat is installed. So it's interesting to see these sitting side by side because these are both the exact same leather. This does have the OEM Phantom Gray leather on it, which is obviously what's on the factory seat. However, this has been, I think, 2 years or 3 maybe, and this has been 14, 15. the scariest part is always getting it out of the car without hitting anything. You've got metal on one side, leather all around. It's a little bit scary. Oh, look at the technique, the style, the poise, the elegance. All right, Austin is connecting the last of the connectors underneath the seats. Before we bolt these in, we're gonna fire this thing up, or at least turn on the electronics to make sure we don't have any warning lights, because if so, then we're gonna have to check those connections, make sure we're not missing anything. As long as there's no warning lights, we can go ahead and actually bolt the seats in. Now, since we already had a warning for the passenger seat, we do have to clear that before we can see if the new old seats still have an issue. If you don't have the right software for this in particular, you may be able to get away with connecting to the chassis port. Again, there's two ports. There's one for the engine, one for the chassis. Connect to the chassis port and tell it you're plugging into a Volvo XC40 or 60, I think. And then you can clear the airbag warning light that way. Of course, if you clear it and it comes back, it means there's still something wrong. But if you need one of these scan tools and you want some Aston Martin software, I actually have those in stock at Red Pants, shop.redpants.lol. There we go, the factory seats are back in. We have cleared off that airbag warning and we are good to go. And that little parking sensor has receded into itself like it's too cold outside.
The proper way to fix it is to remove the rear bumper cover and replace the double-sided tape holding the parking sensor to the inside of the bumper cover. Given our time constraints, we instead put some epoxy on a Q-tip, stuck it inside the hole to get it on the sensor's mounting plate, and then I shoved my arm up inside the jungle of sharp metal brackets to press the sensor onto the backside of the bumper cover.
One thing that I had already done to prep for getting this car into Japan is to change out the muffler. This is from Velocity AP, as you can tell from the badge, which I feel like should be the other way around, because when you're looking at the car from the back, it's not right side up. So it seems like it should be the other way around. But anyway, this is the touring level muffler. It's non-valved. It's the quietest one they make. And the reason I got this one was because Japan has some pretty strict noise regulations. I believe it's 95 decibels in certain types of testing. So this is the quietest one they make. I like the way it sounds, but I don't like how quiet it is personally. Some people love that. For me, I like the way my car sounded before. I liked it having more noise, but that's one of the things that I had to do in order to hopefully get this into Japan as easily as possible. So next up, we are raising the ride height on these BC Racing coilovers. These have a lot of adjustability. The highest ride height for them is about ½ inch lower than stock. Right now, my car is sitting at about 0.75 to 0.8 inches lower than stock. So we have about ½ an inch, well, maybe ½ an inch that we can raise it up. We're only doing that for clearance. I actually love the way that this car sits. It's exactly how I want it. So we're going to take some measurements to make sure we can put it back once it arrives in Yokohama. Of course, we all like the way cars look lowered, but sometimes it's not practical. For example, take a look at this. That is clean through the paint and into the body panel itself. Now, that was when I had this car on H&R Springs, which sat about almost 1.5 inches lower than factory, which is quite a bit. It looked amazing, but it wasn't very practical because this is, I wouldn't say typical, but it did happen quite a bit. Where I would scrape on things and I had to plan my routes accordingly. I've gotten stuck in a few places. And now you also have to remember, this is through the paint without any extra spoiler. So if you have a carbon fiber front lip spoiler, for example, that's gonna stick down even further. You can figure you'd lose another good ½ of an inch that the car would sit lower because of that sticking down. So keep that in mind when it comes to your suspension choices and how low you want the car to sit. So here's that extra ride height. I think it was 8 millimeters in the rear and then 5 in the front. Doesn't sound like a lot, but it did make a difference, and hopefully it's enough to keep my car safe during shipping. So even at this ride height, it doesn't look too bad. I mean, it's definitely higher than I want, especially in the front. It could drop a few centimeters, or I guess a centimeter, but frankly, it looks really good this way. and I'm really happy with the fact that we could get it up as much as we did, and it'll make it a lot easier to ship. This is absolutely terrifying. Luckily, they've done a really good job of documenting everything, and they've been really professional so far. So we'll see how this goes. And I'm a little worried about my clutch because that's a pretty steep incline.
Just after filming that little bit there, the driver stopped and said he didn't feel comfortable putting my car on the truck, and I can only think that me filming was contributing to that. But I did offer to do it myself. I figured I'm more comfortable and knowledgeable about my car and how it behaves, so if anybody's gonna do it, I'm probably the one that should. So I did, and the way I guess I could describe it was the most wicked awesome uphill reverse burnout I've ever done, if not the only one I've ever done. But basically there was a lot of peeling out in reverse, backing up that steep slope, hoping that I didn't hit the giant Pontiac boat that was behind my car, especially because I couldn't see it because I was going up like this and the car was like this. So my field of vision was all wrong for seeing where that thing was. But it turned out that everything was fine, except for my tires apparently, because I smoked the shit out of those. But the car got on just fine, and that was it. It was off.
And we had plenty of clearance, which is nice. And there we go, that's it. Holy shit, I'm actually getting a little emotional right now. Super friendly, very, very professional. I really liked them. So hopefully it goes well. That doesn't make me feel more comfortable. But there she goes, on her way to Yokohama. Luckily, I live 15 minutes away from the port, so I'll be able to get it home quickly. But that's it. Holy shit. That's it.
Of course, the original plan was to have 3 days to work on the car, during which we'd also be making some in-depth videos about what we were doing and why. But we only had 5 hours. So I filmed whatever I could while Austin worked as quickly as he could to get the car ready for the shippers to collect that next day after I arrived, which luckily we did do. We accomplished everything we needed to do, and the car got safely loaded up and shipped down to LA. And as of filming this little outro video, my car is in a private container at the port of LA waiting to be loaded onto a ship, which will be delivered to the port of Yokohama, which is right there. Now that's when things are going to get really interesting, because my goal is to have my car street registered for use in Japan. But Japan has some very strict requirements and laws when it comes to importing vehicles for street use, and mine's very heavily modified, so I have no idea how this is going to go. I'm going to do my best to film whatever I can. I don't know what kind of access I'll have during that whole process, but I'll do what I can to film what I'm able to, and I'll share as much as I can with you guys, including the total cost, which I have a feeling I'm not going to enjoy. So if you'd like to support what I'm doing, by all means, shop.redpants.lol. But that will be the next video, and hopefully it's the next one video and not hopefully the next several videos, because I can't take much more of things going sideways every time I turn around. So if you liked what you saw, please give the video a like, share it with your friends and family. Who knows, maybe they'll like it too. And if you want to see what happens next, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, you know, all the YouTubey stuff, and I will see you in the next video.